Bows have received a complete overhaul in Nightreign to make them an extremely viable primary option, and when in the hands of Ironeye, it makes him the single best Nightfarer in the game, in my opinion. Like, look at the damage of just one singular arrow. Yeah, he can be very broken, and I'll explain exactly how he managed to pull this off, but first let's cover how the bows have changed since Elden Ring. The bows do not have any finite ammunition, you can spam them over and over again. They have this insane magnetism, like you can just aim in the general direction, it'll end up hitting the target. They can get critical attacks now, and they also have been streamlined. There are no more light bows or medium bows. They have combined the both, but unfortunately they gave them all the medium bow moveset, so those fast combos like jumping into landing attack combos are just no longer there. They're still viable as a ranged option for dex builds, and they're neat at reviving your teammates, but they're just not fast enough to be as consistent. However, with the Ironeye, he does get a much faster moveset with the bow, and there is basically no trade-off in terms of damage either. He also does get a slightly different heavy attack, as it can hit multiple enemies at the same time, but it is very situational. So for the most part, you can just be spamming these decent damaging arrows at a safer distance. Now you still have to be wary of your distance though, because damage fall off is very real. And also to note, great bows do not get a different moveset with the Ironeye either. Now as for his scalings, he has very poor health, basically no reason to use spells, but good stamina and good dexterity scaling. His A scaling in dex and D scaling in strength is pretty much identical to the bow scalings. If you have watched my recent video about the scaling breakdowns, you can get a better understanding to all the weapon types that work well with him. Like curved swords and katanas are obviously going to do well, but if you wanted to play melee, just play the Executor because he just gets more damage and more health. Like this guy's a bit more squishy and he's built around using the bows, so just stick with that. And yes, Executor does get those better scalings and dexterity and can get more damage with the bows, but as I mentioned, the faster moveset that the Ironeye gets is just way better and can just output way higher DPS. And kind of like the Executor, the Ironeye does get a decent arcane scaling, so if you manage to find some status effect arrows or the Serpent Bow, then you can benefit a lot more, even though those are pretty rare to find. But with the Ironeye, those chances are made a little bit higher due to his passive skill, Eagle Eye. This buff just increases the amount of loot you obtain from enemy drops and even in chests. Most loot like from bosses are fixed and doesn't really affect those, but I kind of feel that it does sometimes boost your chances of finding rare stuff. Like out of the 5 or 6 times I managed to find a Wending Grace, 4 of them have been with the Ironeye. And he isn't even like one of my most played Nightfarers as well. It is probably just a coincidence, but he does definitely feel better with the drops. And also this passive does extend to the whole team too, no matter where they are in the map. But with that out the way, let's get into the good stuff, the character skill marking. This skill is kind of complicated, but the power is undeniable. This is easily one of the best skills in the game. It is a lunging attack that does like roughly just as much damage as like a greatsword light attack, covers a nice distance, it staggers well, it's good at cleaning up kills, but it does 2 things that makes it incredible. 1, it has iframes, and with how far this thing dodges, for how long the animation can be, how you can track with it, there are so many bosses or risky situations that you can get yourself out of with something like this pretty easily. But most importantly with the skill, it applies a debuff to enemies. It makes them take roughly 10% more damage for 15 seconds, and this skill has a 10-second cooldown, so you can pretty much always have it applied and hit multiple enemies too. Now it's not always going to last 15 seconds, because if you do enough damage, the debuff does go away, which is honestly what you want, because when the debuff breaks, or this mark breaks, it does this crazy chunk of damage that's similar to bleed. Like clearly there's some type of like flat damage plus percentage damage going on, because when I land this attack, sometimes with certain buffs procced, it just destroys things. And on top of all that, it does insane stance damage and insane stagger damage. Like it can send enemies flying to the ground sometimes when this mark breaks. And it kind of feels like I can stance break just as much with a bow as I do with some of these strength builds because of how good this skill is. And just being able to do all of this while sitting at a safer distance after using an insane lunging iframing attack, yeah, you can kind of see why this character is broken. And it doesn't even just stop there. The Ironeye ultimate single shot is also amazing and one of the better ults in the game. It's a really good AoE shockwave projectile attack that has an option to be fired or be charged to help with the aiming. The charge doesn't affect the damage, although there is a relic that helps it out, as I will talk about soon. But not only does it cover a wide AoE, but it also goes through walls, shields, enemies, it temporarily staggers them, and it does do more damage than the ult of Guardian and Raider. And it can also do twice as much damage as Wilder's ult if you just mark the enemy first with your skill. So yeah, this man's entire kit is just broken. And the funny thing is, it keeps going. He has so many amazing relic perks and buffs that you can find that pair so well with him. Starting off with the character specific relics, one of them just gives you a second charge of the marking skill. Yep, just another free broken dodge and an opportunity to do big damage and big stance damage. There also is another buff that does extend the duration of this debuff too. It goes from 15 seconds to 20 seconds. Now it doesn't affect how much damage you need to do before it breaks the mark, and with how often you'll damage enemies, it isn't going to be the most useful thing, although it is still pretty good. His last two character specific relics boost his ultimate attack. One can add poison when the art is fully charged, and the poison buildup is really high. Almost every boss in the game gets procced in just one hit. And as having percentage damage against these bosses with really high health is invaluable, and there are a handful of buffs out there that help synergize with poison too, whether it be damage boosting or health regen buffs. And the last character specific relic perk is the increase of counterattack damage after using the ultimate. Now, counterattack damage is when an enemy is in the middle of an attack combo and gets hit by piercing damage. Like they just take bonus damage to this one particular damage type and none else. And obviously arrows are doing piercing damage, so it benefits off counterattacks. And with how often you can spam attacks with a bow, and with how often enemies can spam attacks, there's a very good chance you're doing a lot more damage. Now, counter damage in this game is around about 10% more, but with this relic buff active, it's more so around about a 30% damage boost, and it does last about 30 seconds, which honestly is decent, but realistically it's only going to be active for around about 2 minutes of an entire expedition, so I wouldn't really bother with it unless you have nothing else. Now, one thing you may have been noticing from my gameplay is that I'm constantly switching between the bows, and that's because there is one particular boss relic that allows you to not only get a damage boost upon switching, but also gain a weapon buff and have that buff be increased too. Now, the reason why this relic isn't used as much is because it doesn't do too well with other weapon classes. It's hard to find multiple of the same weapon type, and also trying to make a switch between weapons seamless, and also switching at melee range is very risky. But when you're using a bow, you can just be at a safer distance, and as soon as you run out of stamina and wait for it to come back, you can just switch to another bow, which pretty much guarantees the exact same moveset. And with this relic, you're essentially doubling your damage. Like, I don't think anything else needs to be said, like it's just doubling your damage. Another relic worth using would be starting off an expedition with Rain of Arrows equipped on your bow. This skill just melts and destroys all larger bosses, and there are a lot in this game. Like, this is another staple and key piece of the Ironeye, but the problem is that it's not guaranteed, so just having a relic that just guarantees it to drop is always going to be really good. In terms of some other relics I'd run, it'd be basic stuff like cooldown buffs, health boosting buffs, bow boosts, but in terms of the in-game buffs, obviously anything that has boosted ranged weapon attacks, just leave it in your inventory, you don't even need to have it equipped. Other buffs like improving counterattack damage from a passive or the speed talisman is great. Obviously arrow sting talisman and reach talisman, the shard of Alexander if you have rain of arrows. But anyway, that's basically everything I wanted to cover. If I did miss anything, just let me know down in the comments below, and also just let me know what character you would like for me to cover next. And if you have been enjoying these Nightreign videos, please do like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next. See ya!